there.
So tell me how you and Mom met.
How did Mom and me meet?
It was you were going out with somebody, and
I was going out with a young woman who wanted to dump me, and they worked at a lawyer's office or something. She was working in a lawyer's office, and said she had a friend she wanted me to meet.
Mm-hmm.
There was her partner at the lawyer's office, or the office, wherever. And I got to have a blind date with Nancy for, I think, took her out for a meal or did something weird, short term. And we sort of liked each other, and decided to see each other, and one thing led to another. But and this is Charles, just so did not accept me, ever.
Well, you were driving this sports car. What was it? The MG then, or was it pre-MG?
No, I had the MG originally, because I remember picking Nancy up. She was somebody's maid of honor,
right,
at a wedding, and she was in total wedding regalia in my open MG, veil trailing out behind us.
Right.
and she just loved it. She didn't care. That's what I guess I figured I had to marry her right there. And then she was a wonderful person came into my life and stayed there.
And then you asked her to marry you, and she ran into the house and said...
She said she'd think about it.
Right.
and left me sitting there in the car.
And there was one time that her mother came running out and asked her if she was all right. She was sitting in the car with you.
I'm trying to remember that this event, whether she came running out of the house or running down the stairs or something, whatever it was.
She said she
thought she'd heard her crying.
Right, right.
And yes, I remember that distinctly.
Anyway, Mom only made you wait one day before she gave her answer.
And she said yes, she'd marry me. Which was, I thought, quite remarkable, all things considered, that she was a very popular person.
Yes.
Had a lot of friends, male friends, wanting to marry her, I think.
Right.
For some strange reason, she chose me.
Yes.
How lucky was that?
Well, it was lucky for me, otherwise I wouldn't be here.
It was lucky for all of us.
So then you went to New York on your honeymoon.
Well, it was the thing to do. Ray and Joan and Ruth and Peter had all been off to New York on their honeymoons.
But you had to go to the hospital first, because you aspirated some confetti or something.
Well, yes, Ruth threw a fistful of confetti into my face. You could go right out to the plane in those days.
Right.
You didn't, and they were all out at the plane with me.
Right.
and yes, she threw a fistful of confetti at me, one of which I seemed to have partially inhaled.
But they fixed you up.
And instead of going to the hotel, we went to the hospital. Emergency.
Very romantic.
Emergency. I remember Nancy sitting in the waiting room, in her going away marriage regalia,
mm-hmm.
surrounded by our bags and everything.
Right.
And all the nurses looking through
right.
the doors at her.
Right.
It's a picture I can't forget. Well, some nice doctor took me in and took along pair of something and reached into the back of my throat.
Right.
With them.
And then you were fine.
Well, to this day, I'm wondering if I imagined the whole thing, and this doctor was smart enough to play along with it and pretend to remove something from me.
Well, who knows? But you couldn't breathe, so you may have been
I gagged all the way to New York.
You may have just been having a panic attack.
Well, quite likely. And that wonderful doctor realized I was probably having a panic attack.
Mm-hmm.
And treated me accordingly, and gave me back my confidence. I can remember to this day how nice man he was.
Anyway, you had a lovely time in New York
Then we went
City.
to the hotel.
Yes, and you saw some shows.
Well, I saw a lot of salespeople on for Raya at the job I was doing, and they all showed up with tickets for everything.
Mm-hmm.
We had shows, half a dozen shows to see at least when we got there, and then somebody said we had to go to Frankie and Johnny's, which was the best advice I could have ever had.
Yeah, well, that sounds great.
We then had a home away from home, and they were so nice. Johnny Jr. ran the bar, and he was so nice.
Right.
And there was a lady. I'm not sure what his relationship to the lady was, but were related.
Was she the bartender?
Well, they had a big dining room,
Yeah.
and this little bar off of it, where if you didn't know it was there, you probably wouldn't find it. And we went to after that. We just went to the bar every night.
Right.
Sat around and met people, because you could meet the world sitting in this little bar.
Because it was just a little bar in the back of the restaurant.
That's right. You had to know it was there. You'd never find it, never see it, never wonder.
And the actors came in after their shows.
That's right. We're right across the street from one of the big
Right.
theaters, and right in the heart of the theater district, on 45th Street or something. That's where we were.
And Mom knew who the actors were, but you had no idea who anybody was.
I never knew anybody, but yes, of course she did. She's so much smarter than I was, and recognized everybody. But we met some fairly important actors, whom I didn't know who they were.
Right.
Nancy knew, of course, who they were. They were all, well, there was a theater directly across the street, so they would, whoever was playing there, would
Right.
step into the bar for a drink before going on to the hotel. And if I could only remember, because he never, one of them never sat down. He just leaned against the door
Right.
frame, had his drink, and then left.
So I just wanted to talk about one more thing. So when I was born in 1954, you lived in the West End. We lived in the West End.
We did.
And when I was about 6 weeks old, we had a hurricane in,
Or a hurricane, even.
yes, in Toronto.
We
The
did.
famous-
It came up the coast from the Gulf or something, and we weren't used to having hurricanes
Well, not in Toronto.
in Toronto.
In fact, it was a perfect storm, like the perfect storm. So it merged with another storm. And
Yes, it did. It grew in intensity, which usually they decreased in intensity as they came up, but it got to be bigger and bigger.
And this was the famous Hurricane Hazel.
Hurricane Hazel.
And so describe, you were at work that day, and describe getting home from work that day.
Well, I got we lived. I had to go over a bridge to get to the house.
Because we were
on
way
the west
on the
end.
other side of the Don.
Of the river,
So, not the Don, the Humber.
the Humber River,
And
and they closed the bridge after the bus I was on went over it.
right,
Bridge was
'cause
closed. No
I
more
think
traffic.
it washed out or something.
And it was very wild, and something had given way, I think, underneath it. And but I got on a bus, the last bus that went over the bridge, and so I got off at my stop. I had to walk several blocks to get to our house,
hmm
and
You were sort of knee deep in water.
and I was up to my ankles in water all the way up the road. It was a little river
Yeah.
that I was walking up, and got to the house and all, and then we were safe and dry. My brother phoned to see if I was still alive,
Yes.
because the bridge was out at this point, and all the news broadcasts were quite
Mhm.
ominous, and he wondered if I was actually home. Oh dear, there's lots of. We had this lovely little house.
hmm
It was a small house,
On the train tracks.
right on the train track. I can't believe that some salesman persuaded us to buy it. Well, he said, he lied to us. I remember. He said there was like the odd train went by,
Right.
and you might see one around 5 o'clock.
Right.
It turned out to mean the main
CN line.
CN line or
something,
CP line
Right.
going west. And like they had 110 trains a day or something going through this thing. It was always a train going by. And the house, it was like they made a picture of some English. I remember they were on a similar kind of situation, and they all had to stop speaking when the train was going by.
Right.
And the house would always bounce. And that's the way our house was. It would bounce up and down as the train went by. But we, it got to be a thing. Oh, and also we were on a corner, so that at night the trains had great, huge light in the front of them.
Right.
There were steamers in those days. And it would come straight at the house and then take a bend
Right.
just before it got to us. And so we had this, at night, this beam coming right at us many times, because being the main line.
But the good thing was that when I was crying and a train went by, I would go to sleep.
Oh yes, well the whole house shook and your bed shook and it would be sound asleep by the time the train was gone.
I still like trains.
No, but I do remember it was quite true. It would put you to sleep every time. It was quite useful in that regard.
Yes.
I can
So
remember my brother phoning to see if
yeah,
we
to
were
see if we were
alive.
still alive. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're in Nantucket, and so in 1963, you and Mom went on a little. You left me and Bruce at home with a nanny, and off you went to drive around New England.
We did, because being new car introducing, I could never get out before September, but we used to get out as early in September as possible.
Right.
And driving around was the thing we liked to do. And we loved New England, so we saw a lot of New England. In those days, I don't know what New England is like now, but it was a wonderfully charming, friendly place for a couple of Canadians.
Yes.
And we got to know the ins and outs of New England quite well. Where to stay and stuff. We took more than one vacation there.
So you were down on Cape Cod. You made it somehow down onto Cape Cod.
Well, we were in a hotel in Cape Cod, and the weather was a little inclement, as I recall, and we were looking around. There was a sign on a wall saying, "Visit the islands."
Right.
And we didn't know what that meant. So I spoke to someone in the hotel who made a booking for us to go to whatever that first...
Martha's Vineyard.
No, it was the first time. There's the first time.
Yeah, Martha's Vineyard.
Martha's Vineyard.
Yeah.
And we got on the boat and realized that Martha's Vineyard was like right there.
Right.
And so I spoke to the steward, and he said you can go all the way to Nantucket if you like.
Right.
And so we were on the boat for a couple of hours rather than 15 minutes.
Yes.
And it was cloudy all the way. This is what we saw.
Foggy.
It was foggy. We couldn't see anything until suddenly we broke out of the fog, and there was this island sitting in a circle of sunshine.
Right.
It was just Nantucket. And we didn't know what Nantucket was at all. But the boat moored, and we got off, and we walked up Main Street.
Right.
And we're just sort of, Nancy and both of us, but Nancy was very charmed by the whole thing. Well, in those days, it was even more charming. It was a little more, it was much less public than it is today.
But remarkably, Main Street looks almost the same.
And Main Street hasn't changed.
Right.
Well, some of the stores have changed.
Right, but
But the street itself looks remarkably like it we first saw it.
Right.
As we walked up the cobblestones and all. And the fact, we got the history right away that the cobblestones are there because they were to give ballast to the ship coming over. So.
Right. Right, when they were empty.
And they unloaded them, and somebody put them to use paving the muddy roads. They were much muddy roads up to that point, and they paved them with all these cobblestones. So that's a bit of the history of Nantucket.
And then the next year, 1964, we decided that we would come here for our summer vacation.
Well, we liked it so much. Nancy loved it right away, and as it turned out, I was doing some work with a photographer in New York who said he had when we were talking about, and I was sort of saying we were thinking about going to this place. Oh, he said, I have a sister who's in the real estate business in Nantucket. Oh, how remarkable was that? So he put me immediately in touch with his sister.
That was the Morris.
Who turned out to be the Morris.
Right.
I didn't know who they were at the time.
Right.
and said she said she'd get us a place to live. Well, she got us a place to live in those days, which was right totally out of town, as far out of town as you could possibly get.
Right.
And still be on the island.
In Nantucket.
And Nantucket, and
about 6 miles from town.
well, it seemed a long way.
Right.
Particularly at night.
Right, at night when you can't see anything.
And with a fog, with a heavy fog, and all you could see was the white line on the road.
Right.
Which seemed to be many nights like
Yes,
that.
exactly.
I remember them vividly, just following the white line.
And there were no lights.
And there were no lights on the road highway at all. We had to get all the way out to Nantucket, following the white line. Thank goodness for the white line.
And it was a nice little cottage, which we called Poverty Pocket.
Well, it was a lovely little cottage. I was a bit surprised at how small it was, but Nancy just took it right over.
Right.
And made it hers. And
we were right by the beach.
Loved Nantucket.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, it turned out to be the place we always came back to because it was the only place she could relax, she said.
Right, right.
And so we came back so she could relax.
And our dog, Alouette, she loved it too.
And we brought the dog, found out we could do that.
She ran around the moors.
And she loved the moors. And it was much more, there were no buildings. Out in our end of there were like a half a dozen buildings around us. There was, as I recall, a lawyer lived across the water from us,
Mm-hmm.
on the other side of under the bridge.
Right.
And because I remember he showed up at our door one night. He mistook us for somebody else he had to see. So we got to meet him that way.
Right.
It was like about 10 o'clock at night, and he knocked on the door. Alouette went crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But it turned out to be our neighbor, who was a lawyer, thinking that he was finding his client at our address.
Right.
That was the most we ever saw of him, but that was just a moment I've never quite forgotten it.
And then we had one of the characters of Nantucket living near us.
We had
Nantucket Millie.
Nantucket Millie and her dogs.
Right.
And so we all knew Nantucket Millie. I knew Nantucket Millie quite well. She was a neighbor, and her dogs.
They were German Shepherds.
They were large dogs.
Yes.
I guess they were German Shepherds. I remember they were all large dogs. And we didn't know that Millie. Well, we found out gradually that Millie had played an important role during the war.
Mm-hmm.
She was the only person, I think, living out there at the time.
Right.
On the end of the island, and she was given the job of watching for German submarines.
Mm-hmm.
So she has to patrol the beach on a very regular basis.
Right.
Making sure there were no German submarines parking themselves out there. And she was, and she had these wonderful dogs, and she was quite a lovely lady, and then we got to know her a bit.
I found her very intimidating.
Well, she would be intimidating, but she'd speak to you like you were a dog.
Right.
What she was used to doing, but she was quite pleasant. So there was Nantucket Millie and on the one side, and then the lawyer on the other side of the bridge. All that we knew met initially.
And there was
there were about half a dozen other buildings. There weren't many houses. There were only about a half, that I can recall. Very lightly populated.
There was a little cafe, which was called
Eats.
We called it Penguins Eats Eats. Yes.
Penguins Eats Eats. I think Bruce
Because that's
made
what
that
the
name
sign
up.
said.
Well, that was what the sign said. Penguins Eats Eats. That's right. That's what it did say. Thank goodness for it.
So,
And we didn't have a telephone, but there was a telephone up by the road.
Right. There was just a phone booth.
Public
with
phone booth,
yeah.
which we used frequently.
And then we'd have to drive into town to buy groceries and
Well,
stuff.
there was nothing out there at that time
Mm-hmm.
in the way of business. And yes, but Nancy loved it immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And drove miles, it seemed, into town to get to do or whatever shopping she had to do.
Yep. At the A&P.
At the A&P, and it was the A&P
Mm-hmm.
back then.
And we went to all the restaurants we used to go to back then are gone. Remember, there was Captain Toby's.
Oh, Captain Toby's, yes.
And
favorite of Bruce's, I believe.
Right, the Mad Hatter.
And the Mad Hatter, yes.
But they're all long gone now. The Captain Toby's was the last one to go. It's just went a few years ago.
Which one?
Captain
Oh,
Toby's.
Captain Toby's, right.
So.
Yes. Well, we saw a lot of Captain Toby. Captain Toby was really there when we were there.
Whoever that was.
Whoever that was. All the original people. Millie was there.
Mm-hmm.
We knew Millie because she was the nearest neighbor,
Right.
almost.
But here we are. It's 2018, and it's 54 years later, and my father and I are still here.
Well,
Still coming here.
because Jeff fell in love with the place.
Yes.
He couldn't give it up.
I was 9 years old when we first came, and I was imprinted.
You were certainly
With
imprinted
the island,
with the
so-
island, yes.
I had to keep coming back, and I still am.
That's right, and thank goodness, because then I get to come back too.
Right.
Once in a while to revisit the memories. But what I really remember is Nancy saying it was the only place she could relax.
Right. I feel the same way.
And she loved it. She just absolutely loved it. No place she wanted to be like Nantucket. And because we learned at an early age to live in the way far away from town as you could get,
Right.
we always did. We saw no reason in changing that. And the funny little cottage that we had, Party Pocket, with,
Yeah.
it had 2 bedrooms.
2 bedrooms, but it was just a few feet from the beach. We could just walk right down to the
Oh,
beach.
absolutely.
And we used to spend, so that beach was the surf side, the surf, but the other side of the island was the calm side.
Yes, and we used to go over to the calm side and take lunch or,
Right.
or dinner or lunch. We'd take lunch, and Nancy would pack up stuff, and we'd go over to
Dionis Beach.
Dionis Beach.
Yeah.
Dionis Beach, and we spent most of our time at Dionis Beach because you
Mhm.
could swim. You could get into the water
Yeah.
and not be washed away immediately.
I think we would often spend like the morning at one beach and the afternoon at the other beach. And
More
go
often
before-
we were at Dionis.
go back and forth.
because
Yeah,
because we were small kids
right.
and you were safe there. You
That's
could play
right.
in the water, and the other beach had great waves crashing on
That's
it much
right.
of the time. And we didn't spend much time on that beach because of the waves. We always went to Dionis.
Right.
Nancy would pack up a lunch and pack up some beer for me and whatever beer for her, and
Right.
off we would go. She was very good at that, and we spent a lot of time at Dionis.
Well, if it was nice weather, we just went to the beach every day.
And then Dionis was the beach.
Yeah, and sometimes it was rainy, but we'd have to stay in and play games or something. But
We had a lot of
mostly we
good
just
funny
went to the
weather.
beach.
We didn't know what, and we didn't go to. Well, Nancy went in town all the time because
Mhm.
she had to shop, and it was not the place to go to shop except A&P.
Right.
So she'd get in the car and drive away, show up later on with supplies. And, yes, indeed.
Anyway, that's it for today. We just wanted to have a little chat